Boom, roasted. Sorry. Sometimes The Office quotes just kind of come out of my mouth randomly. Hi guys, it's Anna Marie. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, please like and subscribe if you enjoy this video. It really helps me out a lot. And if you have been here for a while, we made it over 300, which is so fun. And I just want to thank you guys for that. I know a lot of you are probably new to my channel. I talk about books, mostly fantasy. The majority of it is fantasy. But I do gravitate into new genres every now and then. Also, if you hear anything in the background, there's some construction going on outside my house, so if you hear any sounds, I'm sorry. I think they're not going to be that loud, so hopefully it won't bother you. This isn't ASMR, although that'd be totally cool if it were ASMR. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you guys about 3 series that are basically YA fantasy classics. They are some of the most beloved and occasionally some of the most hated series and books in YA fantasy. A lot of people rant about these series and a lot of people gush about these series, and I have already read them. I have read them a long time ago, but I decided to reread them because a lot of things are happening right now and authors are coming out with either continuations or TV shows, like a lot of things are going on right now. And so I just wanted to go back and read some of these series that I loved when I was younger and see how they held up throughout time, because I'm about to be 25. June 7th is my birthday. And I wanted to see if 15-year-old me and 25-year-old me had the same reading taste and enjoyed the same things. We shall see. So the 3 series that I picked up were Twilight, which I only read the first in the series this month. I'll talk about the rest as I read them because I am going to reread the whole series. I just finished this a couple of days ago, so my thoughts are fresh and I'm excited to talk about it. I also read the first in the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. This is the first Sarah J. Maas that I have ever read. I actually only read it like 2 years ago, I think, and I really enjoyed it, but we'll talk about how the reread went. And then finally, I reread the complete Hunger Games trilogy in preparation for the book that is coming out in today is May 15th. So 4 days. It's coming out in 4 days. So I'm just going to talk about each one and what I thought, and some things that I noticed that I may not have noticed in my first read. So let's get started. So the Throne of Glass series, this is a 7-book YA epic fantasy series. I actually think that this is a really good starting point if you are getting into fantasy, especially if you appreciate YA. I think this is a great start if you want to get into epic fantasy, and this was kind of my introduction to epic fantasy, and I think it was a pretty good start, I'm not gonna lie. So in this first book, we are following Celaena Sardothien. There is a pronunciation guide in the back of the book, just so you know that I know what the pronunciation is. Celaena Sardothien, and she is a renowned assassin. She is a young teenage girl, so I think she's 16 when we start in this book. I think she's 16. Either way, she's killed a lot of people. She's very talented at killing. But somehow, through circumstances that we are not told in this book, she was caught and sent to Indovir. They don't tell you how to pronounce that one in the back of the book. But she is sent to this mining prison, basically, where it's full of slaves and they have forced labor and they whip you, and it's just a lot of people die there. If you go there, it's basically a death sentence because so many people die. So at the beginning of the book, we are following Celaena. She has spent a year in Indovir, but she is being taken to the Prince of Ardalan, and she doesn't know why. She's very sassy. She's taken to the Prince of Ardalan, and he says that his father is trying to find a personal assassin, but he wants to create this sort of competition to find his personal assassin. So he's got several, 24 I think it is, several thieves and assassins and just really scary people who are going to compete, and the one who is alive at the end will get to be his personal assassin. The Prince of Ardalan has chosen Celaena to kind of be his champion, so to speak. So she's taken to I guess it's the capital of Ardalan. It's called Rifthold, and she is accompanied by the Crown Prince, whose name is Dorian. and also the captain of the guard, whose name is Kayal. So she arrives at the castle and she is kind of heavily guarded because obviously she's an assassin, but we just follow her and the captain of the guard and Dorian. We follow her through the competition as people in the competition start to die. They are murdered, very gruesomely murdered, and we don't know who's doing it. So there's that kind of mystery involved, and Selena is very curious, obviously, because she is a competitor, so she's worried for her life. There is a little bit of magic involved. In this world in Otterlin, magic has been kind of forbidden. A couple of years ago, magic just kind of disappeared from their country, like only their country. There is a little bit of a love triangle, of course, because how can you have a YA fantasy without a love triangle? You can't. It's blasphemy. So that's all I'm going to tell you summary-wise, because everything else you just kind of have to pick up as you read. We'll start with Selena. So a lot of people have a problem with Selena because she is very self-possessed. She is very cocky and sassy and into herself in every way. And I understand why that would put a lot of people off, because a lot of times there's this trope of the perfect assassin, and when you aren't given that background and you're not shown how they develop those skills and how they fail over and over again and then they finally succeed and they become the perfect assassin, when you're only given the facts that they are the perfect assassin and they just have everything, every skill, and can beat everyone else because they're better than everyone else in every way, it's just kind of hard to believe at times. So I understand where you're coming from with this. And a lot of people say they hate her personality, again, because she is very self-absorbed. I get that. She's very sassy. However, as for her being confident, I actually kind of like that part of herself. Now, there is a line that she sometimes crosses between being confident and then just being like braggy, and she does cross that line sometimes, and I don't like those parts. But just the fact that she is confident in herself and in her abilities, I don't know, I kind of appreciate that part of her. She doesn't take any crap, you know? She's very confident in who she is. As for the love triangle, I do not like that there is a love triangle in this book. Now, I have very unpopular opinions regarding the love interests in the book. So many people ship Dorian and Selena, and I might lose some people over this, but I just don't. I'm not on the Dorian Selena ship train, if that's a thing. I get their attraction to each other, but beyond that, I just don't see the romance part of it. Like, they don't click, to me at least. This is an unpopular opinion. It just seems like they are such good friends. Like, they can talk with each other and they're very supportive of one another, and then they're also like physically attracted to each other. And I know that kind of sounds like a romance, but there's just something missing for me between them, and I know a lot of people disagree with me. The first time I read this book, I was Team Kale all the way, like all the way. And again, that's an unpopular opinion. Feel free to roast me in the comments, but I did like Kale, and I think it was just because he's the kind of guy who's like really guarded and really broody and just kind of angry all the time. But then with Selena, he's like soft and nice and smiles, and like it's just cute. I don't know. So the first time I read this, I was on Team Kale. So I don't know, I wasn't on Dorian's side there. I love Dorian. Like, I want him to have all of the good things, and I love him to death. I just didn't see him with Selena. So the writing in here, a lot of people do not like Sarah J. Maas's writing, and a lot of people do. I am on the fence. I am in the middle. I kind of think of it this way. A lot of YA authors have this very soap opera-ish writing style where they're very descriptive and it's all very dramatic, and every single moment of every single day has this soap opera feel to it, and it's like, we're all talking like this all the time. She walks out the door, he grabs her arm and pulls her back. It's very dramatic a lot. And I think we're seeing that less and less in YA fantasy and just YA in general. I think people are gravitating away from that because, I mean, that's all we've had for such a long time, is just the soap opera dramatic dialogue and stuff. So you have that kind of dramatic soap opera writing style, and then on the other side you have books that are like, they're just as dramatic, but the writing style is just a lot more realistic. It just feels like real humans thinking through situations. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but this feels like it's on the line in between soap opera dramatic and just realistic dramatic. She does have a lot of dramatic prose in here, but a lot of times she gets in so deep into the characters' minds that it does feel a little bit realistic. So I don't mind her writing because I feel like it suits this exact genre and type of book. I don't know how well her writing would translate into another genre or age group. And I know she has written an adult book, but honestly, to me, the writing in her adult book was the same as the writing in her young adult books. So I feel like the way that she writes is perfect for the genre that she writes for. So it looks like the first time I read this a couple years ago, I rated it 4 stars. I think I would want to adjust my rating. I think I would want to change it to 3.5. Like, I know that's barely a difference, but there are just 4-star books that are better, in my opinion, to this one. So 3.25, 3.5 is what I would probably change it to. Next, since Stephenie Meyer, the legend herself, has decided to come out with Midnight Sun, or in other words, the Pomegranate book. So when I was in that stage, there was rumored to be a Twilight from Edward's point of view, and somehow it got leaked on the internet. And I read that little bit of the first few chapters so many times because I just loved seeing things from Edward's perspective and the way he saw her, and how much she didn't understand his feelings for her. So I read that a couple times and it is finally coming out. What is it, like 10 years later? So obviously 10 years later, my taste in reading has changed a lot. But I loved Twilight. But when I heard the news that Midnight Sun was finally coming out, I decided that it was time for Twilight Reread. And because I have no self-control, I decided to take the plunge and get the white editions of Twilight. This one, the first one's not in there because I'm going to talk to you about it, but they're just really pretty. I love, like, this is my favorite type of cover, when it's just very simple and like white in the background with a little splash of color. I love it. I love it. So I read Twilight. I feel like everybody knows the premise and a summary of Twilight, like what it's about. So remember earlier when I said that, you know, some YA fantasies have this very dramatic soap opera. I don't know if you guys have watched soap operas. I haven't watched a lot of them, specifically for the reason that they're overly dramatic and a little bit annoying at times because of how overly dramatic they are. Well, unfortunately, the writing in this book is a soap opera. It is a soap opera. Every single moment is dramatic. It doesn't matter if she's pouring cereal. It is dramatic. So I didn't love that, because if every moment is dramatic, then no moment is dramatic, if that makes sense. And the dialogue was this way too. It felt like that kind of cheesy, over dramatic dialogue. But honestly, I kind of look over that because of when it was published. During this time, that was the market. Like, that's what everybody wanted, especially in YA paranormal fantasy. Another thing I found while I was listening to this audiobook was that the dialogue for different characters, they all kind of sounded the same. Because I was listening to it as an audiobook, the same narrator was saying all the lines, and sometimes I would get confused because there wasn't any difference in the way each character would speak. Like, usually you have a lot of personality that you can discover through a character's dialogue. But with this, it wasn't really that way. Every character spoke the same way, very dramatic. So I'm going to go ahead and warn you, because this is going to start sounding like a rant, but okay, maybe it's a rant, but it's not like a hate rant, if that makes sense. I will always be a fan of Twilight. It is entertaining, it is fun, and just like over the top dramatic. And I will always have very fond memories of being an obsessed Twilight fan. So this is not to say that I hate Twilight or hated my reread even, but sometimes it was hard to pick up this book and read it. Like, I had to force myself to do it because I just didn't love the way that Bella started to define her worth based off of Edward's opinion of her or her relationship with Edward. When Edward came into the picture and they started to kind of be romantically involved, everything about her, every moment of every day of her entire life became about Edward. And I understand that when you are young, I mean, we were all in that teenager stage of these crushes that would just consume our lives. Like, we would dream about them and think about them all the time, and we were convinced that we were just going to marry them and run off into the sunset happily ever after. I get it, I really do. But it was just kind of disconcerting as an adult who has tried very, very hard to find some sort of self-worth over the years to see Bella just attach all of her self-worth onto Edward. Like, there's one scene that just really gets on my nerves. She has a date with Edward the next day and she just can't be without him. Like, she's ready for it to be tomorrow morning, so she can't stand being awake when he's not here. So she takes some cold medicine to make her go to sleep because she just can't stand being awake without Ed. Like, you get a hobby, girl. You need to pick up a book and you need to read and you need to do something that you like. Please. I understand that this is from a teenager's point of view, and when we are teenagers, we feel that all-consuming love for our crush, and so in that way, I think it kind of depicts a realistic teenager. But toward the end of the book, we start getting into this trope that comes up a lot. Not only in this series, but just in a lot of series, and it gets on my nerves. It's the trope that says, I really love you, I love you a whole lot, but I love you so much that I need to leave you because I'm dangerous. From the beginning of the book, he has known that he's dangerous for her. And then, you know, at the end, when she's kind of gotten into a sticky situation, he decides that he might just have to leave. Like, she needs to go live with her mom. It might be best for her because after letting Bella fall in love with him, he now decides that it's time for her to go. You know, like, he's not good enough to be with her, you know? And I think that's why New Moon is my least favorite, because that's just kind of frustrating that he's all like, oh, Bella, you are my life now. And then, you know, one accident happens, and then in the New Moon, she gets a paper cut and he leaves. Like, I get the dramatic effect for the book, but 25-year-old me is frustrated by that trope. That's all I'm saying. I was not on Goodreads when I read this the first time. I think I was like 15. So I don't know what I think I would have rated it a 5-star then, obviously, because I was obsessed with it. But this time, I think I rated it like, it was not good, guys. I think it was like a 3, maybe a 2.5. I know it was, like, on Goodreads it was a 3, but I think in my head when I put a 3 on Goodreads, I think I was thinking a 2. No, I'll stick with a 3. We'll leave it at a 3, just for nostalgia's sake. So now let us get into the Hunger Games. When you do rereads of your favorite series, you're always kind of scared that it's not going to hold up and it's not going to give you that feeling that you got the first time you read it, of just like awe, and you're never going to read anything so wonderful again, and you get chills. You're so scared that that feeling is going to go away, and you're going to associate the series with being kind of annoyed with it, similar to kind of what I felt with Twilight. This is the exact opposite of that. I have read this series a lot, but it's been at least 6-7 years since my last reread. So I was kind of worried that the writing was going to be kind of cliche. The characters were just going to get on my nerves. Like, I was a little worried, but that was not the case. This series holds up. It is amazing. And honestly, one of my favorite series of all time. And I think a lot of people can say that because it's that good. Like, it's so good. And this was the beginning of all of the YA dystopian craze that we all got into and stayed in for a long while. Like, this was the OG dystopian, and it will remain that way forever. The world building and the ideas behind this book and what it's based on and the characters, like, yes, there are some tropey vibes. Like you'd obviously have that love triangle, and you have the chosen one trope. I don't know, I think there's just something so unique in the way that this trilogy handles all of those tropes. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's just nostalgia, but I don't care, I love it anyway. So obviously The Hunger Games is set in Panem, which is supposed to be the United States in the far and distant future, and we have 12 districts, and each district has their own industry. So you've got like fishing in one, and then mining in District 12, weaponry in one of the districts. I haven't memorized them all, but each one has their own industry. And we follow Katniss Everdeen from District 12. She lives with her younger sister Prim and her mother. Katniss and her best friend Gale go out into the forest to hunt, which is illegal. But it's really the only way that they can provide for their families because District 12 is starving. And obviously we have the Hunger Games, which is a kind of punishment for the districts for their rebellion that was started by District 13. So every year, 2 teenagers are chosen, 1 boy and 1 girl, and they are sent to the capital to fight with all of the other districts in a fight to the death. And just little details like the way that they can get their names put in more times in exchange for food, but that's also a risk for getting chosen at the reaping. Like little details just make the world building so rich. So we are at the reaping, and Katniss has her name in several times, Gale has his name in several times, Prim only has her name in 1 time, and Prim is actually chosen at the reaping, and this is not a spoiler because it says it on the back. But Katniss steps up and she volunteers as tribute. So she goes with Peeta Mellark to the capital to participate in the Hunger Games. I'm not going to talk too much more about summary because everybody kind of knows what this is about. I'm just going to talk about characters and what I love about this book. So I am obviously Team Peeta. What is Team Gale? What is it? I'm not sure. To be honest, Gale gets on my nerves a lot of times in this series. He's just a little bit whiny to me. And it seems like he's just only focused on being in love with Katniss. Like that's all he can think about is just how he's jealous of Peeta and how he wants to kiss Katniss. And it just makes me upset sometimes. But yeah, I am Team Peeta all the way. Just give me the boy with the bread. That's all I need. So one more thing that I love about this book is that while it is pretty action-packed and like we're focused on the games and the results and the death and the action and the killing, it is very character-based. It's very character-driven. Like you learn a lot about the characters through their actions and their descriptions and their dialogue. Like that's one thing that is present in here. You have dialogue that reflects personality. Like Haymitch, everything Haymitch says just fits him so perfectly. He's so blunt and he's so harsh, but he has this like dark, sarcastic humor that honestly, it's kind of impressive that yes, he does self-medicate a lot, but it is kind of impressive that he can maintain his personality and that dark and witty humor throughout years and years of mentoring kids who eventually die. So I don't know, I love Haymitch. He is just fascinating to me. So Catching Fire is probably my favorite in the series. I love Mockingjay so much, but it hurts me in my heart. So Catching Fire is my favorite one, definitely. I love the second games that they go into. I love the setting with the kind of jungle theme, and I also love the clock theme. I think that's really well done. I think Katniss develops a lot in this book. I think she really comes into her feelings for Peeta. Like she tried to resist them so much, and now she's finally understanding that he makes her feel a lot of feelings and she's confused about it, but she kind of lets herself feel those feelings because she expects to die. Like she expects to sacrifice herself so that Peeta can go home. And I think Peeta often reminds Katniss that you have to appreciate the small things. Like, yes, we're surrounded by all of this death and this tragedy and this oppression, but whenever we get the chance to see something that gives us joy, we need to recognize that and acknowledge its beauty. So then I read Mockingjay. This book makes me sad, but it's so good. Like it's really, really good. I liked being in District 13. I liked the seeing the effect that it had on Katniss and Haymitch, and also Finnick. Like, I'm really fascinated by mental health and trying to understand that, because I feel like that's a topic that we know some things about, but we don't really fully understand the effect that a mental illness can have on a person. And seeing Finnick and Haymitch and Katniss handle their PTSD in such different ways, it was really fascinating. And this book is where I really start to love Finnick so much, because he is aware of how off kilter he is, but under all that he still kind of maintains his personal identity. Like, the part where Katniss is like training because she wants to go out into the districts, Finnick wants to go too, but he comes out and he's like dressed in a hospital gown, like half naked, because at this point he's still kind of like recovering. And so Katniss kind of distracts him with something that Beetee has built for him, like a new trident. And so he's really excited. He goes off and Katniss is like, don't you want to put some pants on? And he turns around and he like looks at her with his smoldering look, as I picture it. And he's like, why? Don't you like what you see? And that's just so Finnick, because he has the ability, he has taught himself over time to develop this like sultry, dark sense of humor about his situation, when in reality he is probably extremely damaged from being sold. Like, his body has been sold to several people by President Snow. But even in that, he's maintained his really charming and unique and funny and witty and smart personality through that. I haven't read a lot of books that handle PTSD as well as this series does, especially in Mockingjay. You see a lot of different reactions to trauma, and Katniss specifically is very affected by the trauma that she's been through, so much so that sometimes she's not able to function, and it's just, you don't see a lot of that in fantasy, specifically young adult fantasy. Like, especially if you're reading a book where these young teenagers are going off to war and they're killing people and there's a lot of bloodshed and you're cheering for them when they win, you don't see the aftermath, because there's a lot. I mean, like, you don't go through a situation like that, a traumatic situation like that, and are not affected by it. So I really appreciated that she took the time to show us that a situation like the Hunger Games has a lasting effect, all the way to when Katniss and Peeta are growing old together and having their kids. She still has to go through that list in her head to remind her that she is grounded, she's safe, she's okay. And that's so realistic. Even though, like, we don't have the Hunger Games, obviously as humans we go through our own set of traumatic experiences, and people have to handle it in their own way, just like Katniss has to develop these coping mechanisms. So I was just so impressed and emotional and pleasantly surprised at how much I still loved everything about this series, even after, I don't know when the first one came out. The first one came out in 2008, so 12 years. It is still holding up. It is still amazing, brilliant, wonderful, all of the good things. Because these books, not only are they a kind of political perspective on what our world could become if we continue in a certain way, but they are also just kind of a reflection on human emotions and what happens when we experience trauma. So I don't feel like these books are appreciated as much as they should be for what they really are. Like, yes, they're entertaining and it's just so cool and the world building is great, but it's also a reflection and a study on what happens when humanity is allowed to explore the darkest parts of what we're capable of. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop raving about that series now, because I feel like I've said plenty, but obviously I loved it. I did watch the movies along with it, so overall I enjoyed my reread of The Hunger Games and will do it again one day. Alright guys, I hope you have enjoyed me ranting about my rereads. Thanks so much for coming by to watch, and I'll see you again next time.